Hi, it's Nick the CD Man. Welcome back for a special video. In lieu of the fact that I'm retooling my What I've Been Listening To series, we're going to go to a special video this Monday. And that is the recap of all the albums so far in 2022 to win Album of the Year. Now, there's a criteria for Album of the Year. The first criteria is no reissues. The second criteria is no archival releases, except in special cases. And the third criteria is no albums that were digitally released prior to their release on compact disc or vinyl. Now, there are two exceptions to that, as the albums felt like brand new releases, even though they'd already been released. And one had spent several weeks at number one on the albums chart before being released physically. Anyway, let's start off. January 7th was a very light week for new releases. An album by Rage Against the Machine guitarist Tom Morello, and a box set of an archival release by the great David Bowie. It featured the original album, an album of alternate takes, and an album of unplugged versions of the songs. And it was a shelved album from 2001 of older songs Bowie re-recorded. The label didn't like it. Bowie jetted away to Columbia Records. We're talking about the Toy Box. Right, there you go. And the best track from the album is the focus track, I Dig Everything. The album is a bit long in the tooth, as it is 3 CDs. However, the first album is one of his best in years, and definitely his best new archival work. January 14th, the legendary Elvis Costello had a new album out, and that was called A Boy Named If, and the single from it, Farewell OK, is something you should look up. The album is a decidedly rocking turn with the Imposters, and if you like your rockin' Elvis Costello, this is one for you. January 21st, a decidedly country take from legendary vocalist John Mellencamp. John released Strictly a One-Eyed Jack, and one of the guests on the album was the legendary Bruce Springsteen, marking the first time John and Bruce performed together on an album. The single from it also featured Bruce, Did You Say Such a Thing? On January 28th was one of the two albums, maybe three, that were digitally released first before they were released on a physical product. I counted it because it was highly promoted as a physical release the week of its release. We're talking about The Weeknd and Dawn FM. Best track on this album was Sacrifice, the single. Great album. Definitely look into this if you like. Kind of like robotic R&B. Perfect for that sound. February saw, I'm going to say, 4 new releases from February. And the first of those 4 was by legendary metal band Korn. I hope people can consider them metal. They're not as metal as some people, but hey. Anyway, they were back with Requiem. And the best track from this album was Forgotten, the first focus track. Next up, on February 11th, was one of my top albums of the year so far. And definitely one of my top singles of the year so far. The single Brother the Cloud by Eddie Vedder is definitely one of my favorite singles of the year so far. We're talking about Eddie Vedder and Earthling. February 18th was a group, I'm not going to pronounce their name, and it was with Leon Bridges, and it's called Texas Moon. Very light week for new releases, as an EP wins Album of the Week. Best song on the album, the track B-Side. Give me a second. February 25th was another reunion of sorts. A big trend in 2022 was classic acts from the 70s, 80s, and 90s coming back after absences or putting out new albums. And another act to put out a new album was Kurt Smith and Roland Orzabal, better known as Tears for Fears. They were back with a new album, The Tipping Point. Great stuff there. You can see that they've aged on the back cover. Still great stuff. And the best song of the album was No Small Thing. Let's get my next pile together. And we go into March, And the first week in March saw the only classical album to win Album of the Week. Now, it was a very light week for new releases. But if you know me, you know that one of my favorite albums of all time plays Ennio Morricone by Yo-Yo Ma. And so I am a big Yo-Yo Ma fan. Not a diehard fan like some classical heads are, but yes, I really like his music and I own a great deal of it. Anyway, Yo-Yo Ma released a new album in March of 2022 with Emanuel Ax and Leonidas Kouvalis. I hope I pronounced that name right. And it was called Beethoven for 3, Symphonies number 2 and 5. Now, for those non-classical fans out there, Symphony number 5 is the basis for the great Walter Murphy hit, A Fifth of Beethoven. Great stuff, and was sonically one of the best albums of the year. Now we're up to, when we get to it, March 11th. Another legendary act coming back. There's that trend again. It was an artist who charted way back in the 1980s with hits like Heaven, Run to You, and Everything I Do It For You. We're talking about Bryan Adams, So Happy It Hurts. And I would definitely give a plus to this as being one of the top album artworks or booklets or whatever for the year so far, as it comes in this nice book. Now we're up to March 18th. The only non-English, non-instrumental album, singing album to come out this year to win Album of the Week. And it was heavily promoted on television Saturday Night Live with Zoe Kravitz of Catwoman fame, playing Catwoman in the Batman fame, as she was the musical guest that week. We're talking about Rosalia, and I'm not going to pronounce the name right for the album. It's called, I'm not even trying to pronounce that, Moto Miami, I think it's called, or something like that. And The Weeknd is featured on one track on the album called La Familia, probably the best track on the album, with The Weeknd singing in Spanish. Now we're up to March 25th, and the album of the week was by super vocalist Michael Bublé. Michael came out with a new album called Higher, and a new single called I'll Never Not Love You. Excuse me, I'm getting that title wrong. But the best track on the album was an album called Mother. As I lost my mother during the early part of COVID in 2020 to an unrelated to COVID illness, Mother tugged my heartstrings. I would say it was probably the most emotional I've gotten to a song in 2022. Also on this album is a cover of Paul McCartney's My Valentine from his 2010's day, and Paul actually produced the record for Michael. Great stuff indeed. We're now going to go into April. Now, several albums on my Album of the Week series were ones I got right. Albums that went to number one on Billboard's 200 Albums chart and one Album of the Week. And the first of those was by the hard-rockin' alternative band Red Hot Chili Peppers. The boys reteamed with their guitarist John Frusciante for this album. The first of two for this year, as a new one comes out in October. Unlimited Love. The best song on this album were the two singles, Black Summer and These Are the Ways. For April 8th, my birthday week, the album of the week was the first act and only act this year to have two album of the weeks. We're talking about White Stripes guitarist Jack White. Jack had a busy 2022 as he put two albums out this year. The first of those two featured the great single Taking Me Back, Jack White and Fear of the Dawn. April 15th saw one of the few indie artists to go for my album of the week. A trend that sadly doesn't continue and get enough love. However, Kurt Vile got enough love on April 15th with his album entitled Watch My Moves. And the great single, let me get the name of the single. The great single called, I think it's Like Exploding Stones. Yes, Like Exploding Stones. Okay. April 22nd was Record Store Day weekend, as Saturday was Record Store Day, so we have two titles for that week. The official title for that week of April 22nd was by legendary slide guitarist and vocalist Bonnie Raitt. Bonnie was back on the, let me get the label right, Red Wing Records label with a new album called Just Like That. Really, really, really good stuff, especially the single Made Up My Mind. And the Record Store Day release for the actual Record Store Day was an instrumental album by legendary guitarist from the group Metallica, Kirk Hammett. Now, Metallica is famous for not letting their members do solo projects. This is the first of such thing, and it's very heavily rooted in the orchestral sounds of Ennio Morricone, something I love. We're talking about Portals by Kirk Hammett, and the best track on this album is the instrumental track High Plains Drifter, reminiscent of those 60s Western soundtracks. And lastly for April, on April 29th, Palomino by the country singer Miranda Lambert was my album of the week. Now, Miranda Lambert is known for one of my favorite records of all time, The House That Built Me, and this album does not disappoint. Especially the single entitled Let me get the name of it again. If I Was a Cowboy. Now we're into May. May had 4 albums, and the first in May was a group who appeared on Saturday Night Live with Benedict Cumberbatch of Doctor Strange fame, and they performed their great song, dedicating it to their son Regine and Win are married, called Look Out Kid, or it's actually Unconditional One, Look Out Kid. We're talking about Arcade Fire from Canada and We. Another great album artwork. Love the gold on this album artwork. Then we go into, I'm going to get the next date there, May 13th, another alternative act, sort of on the indie scene, not completely. We're talking about Florence Welch and Florence and the Machine. She released a new album with Dance Fever, and the great single was Free. I also liked, let me get the other title, Free, and I also liked My Love is the other song I liked in this album. Really good stuff. Now, another album I got right was an album by former boy bander Harry Styles. Harry's albums are better than what I would say most pop albums are these days. And this album is no exception. Harry's Home. And the best tracks in the album are Late Night Talking and the monster hit As It Was. Now we're into June. June had 2, 4, 5 titles. Actually, sorry about that. We're in the last week in May. I apologize for that. The last week in May was legendary 80s and 90s rockers Def Leppard and Diamond Star Halo. Back to their great sound. However, this does have the keyboard sounds that are more of their more modern albums as well. But it doesn't detect from a great album. And the best song on the album is the single Kick and the single Take What You Want. Anyway, moving on, I got the last pile here. This is June through August. And we start with June. June had a total of 5 albums, and the first was SNL guest, along with Selena Gomez in May. Post Malone. Hard to believe he's only appeared on Saturday Night Live once. And the album is 12 Carat Toothache. And the best single from this album is, I'm going to get the name, sure that's right on here, One Right Now with The Weeknd. Up next for June 10th was former American Idol Carrie Underwood and her latest album, Denim and Rhinestone. And the best song on the album was a single, Ghost Story. The following week was a hard week. Record Store Day was the next day, and not much came out that week. So my album of the week went to another country singer. This time, Brett Eldredge. The great album, Songs About You, and the single, Songs About You, is the best song on the album. Now, for Record Store Day drop. Now, let's explain the difference. Record Store Day, for those who don't know about it, is a day when the Record Store Days celebrate independent record stores by releasing exclusive releases just for that day. Record Store Day drop, they don't want the fanfare, they do want the releases. And a much smaller selection of releases usually is out. I did find a CD for that day to put on my best of Record Store Day drop number 2 for the best. And it was by country alt-rock group Wilco. Cruel Country. And the best track on this album was Falling Apart Right Now, the focus track. The album is a double album, and it appears on the DBPM record label. On June 24th, another country artist won my album of the week, but this one was well-deserving. Superstar Luke Combs, who's Even Though I'm Leaving, got me through my mother's passing, is back with a new album called Growing Up, and the best song on the album was a single called Doing This. Now we're into July. July had a total of 5 titles, and the first was hard rockin' band Shinedown with their album Planet Zero. On this album, Shinedown's best single was the title cut, Planet Zero. Okay, moving on. On July 8th, another legendary band came back, this time with new membership. On the album playing is drummer Narada Michael Walden. You may know him from producing records for artists like Jermaine Stewart, Aretha Franklin, and Whitney Houston in the 1980s. And bassist Randy Jackson, Dog, you know him from American Idol. He's the guy who says Dog on American Idol. He also appeared with Mariah Carey on some of her 90s albums and was a member of Journey, at least the touring band and the recording band, in the mid-1980s. Now, since this album's been released, both Narada and Randy have left the group, but the album doesn't suffer from that. And the album is called Freedom, and it's Journey. The singer on this album is their latest singer, Arnel Pineda, the best singer they've had since Steve Perry in the 1980s and 90s and 70s, or whatever you want to call it again. Moving on. On July 15th, we had double duty SNL host Lizzo. She appeared on SNL in April, hosted musical guest, and performed 2 tracks. The great About Damn Time, which is one of the best singles of the year so far, and a really nice album cut called Special. We're talking about Lizzo and Special. Of note is also the new single called To Be Loved. One of the things about that Lizzo album, along with Post Malone and The Weeknd, I was surprised about is neither of those albums debuted number 1 on Billboard's 200 albums chart. And in the case of Lizzo and Post Malone, an album coming up actually took its place at number 1. I'll get to that. For July 22nd, the album of the week was the second album to be released this year for Jack White, Entering Heaven Alive. Now, I don't think this album is as good as the first album he released this year, but it is still great. Definitely get to like it from me. Anyway, the best single on the album was, let me get the name of it, I've Got You Surrounded With My Love, Queen of the Bees, and Help Me Along. Great, great, great album. Now we're into July 29th, and the album of the week is probably the most anticipated album of the year. Superstar Beyonce was back with Renaissance, and the great single, Break My Soul. If you like the dance sounds of the 70s and 80s, you will love, and the 90s, you will love this album. It's danceable from start to finish. Great stuff from Beyonce, one of the top albums of the year. Now, for August, there are 4 albums, although I can't show the last album. I'll explain at the end. The first album is the second album of the year, actually maybe the third, Beyonce I'm not positive on, that was not released concurrent on CD and on digital streaming services the same week. It had been number 1 for several weeks on the Billboard 200 albums chart, possibly becoming the number 1 album of the year, before being released on CD. In fact, when I went to record the albums, since I make a dummy of each album that's not available on CD, I couldn't. One track didn't fit at the end of the 79-minute disc. Thank God they split the album in half for me on a physical CD. We're talking about Bad Bunny. Reggaeton was all over the place in 2022. And I apologize to Rosalia. There were 2 Spanish albums this year. And the album's called, let me get the name of this correctly. The album is called Un Verano Sin Ti. Don't speak Spanish, so I can't verify that. One of the best tracks on the album is Moscow Mule. Another one is Mi Porto Bonito with Chencho Corleone. And for those who don't like reggaeton, take a listen to this Bad Bunny album. You might change a little bit. As my wife's a big reggaeton fan, a lot of it gets played around this house. And this one is one of the more tolerable ones. It's actually really, really good. Okay, next up we have August 12th. Another welcome band. Remember their hits Name, Iris, Slide. Goo Goo Dolls are back as a duo. It's called Chaos in Bloom. And the best song on the album is a track called, let me get the name of it. I Like You Are the Answer. Save Me From Myself. Yeah, I Like You. Great, great, great stuff. Now for August 19th, we have another band coming back. They are Brendan Urie and Panic at the Disco with their new album, Viva Las Vengeance. The best song on the album is Tarot Cut, Viva Las Vengeance. And it's got a sound that Panic at the Disco fans are really going to like. Now for this week, unfortunately, Amazon, shame on you, my album of the week title hasn't arrived yet. However, it is on its way. It says it'll be here Tuesday, which means I can put it in the new finds video for next week. It's the brand new album by the Dirty Heads. Now, the Dirty Heads are known for their single Lay Me Down with Rome from Sublime. That's the one I got hooked on them with. They're kind of a ska reggae band. And what got me hooked on this album over the new Muse album is the fact that they covered Joe Walsh's 1970s classic Life's Been Good for the first single. Really liking their reggae take on Life's Been Good. Probably one of the best songs of the summer so far. We're talking about Midnight Control by the Dirty Heads. My album of the week for August 28th. There you have it. My recap of all the albums of the week for 2022. Starting with David Bowie's The Toy Box, January 7th, and ending with Midnight Control by the Dirty Heads on August 28th. Every week in my What I'm Looking Forward To video on Fridays, you will see me add another to the collection, and I'll do a recap of the rest of the year starting in September in December. If you like this video, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the dingy to be notified, and I'm Nick S., the CD Man, signing off. Enjoy your physical media, and have a great weekend.